You have already explained yourself. You have defended what you did, predicted their response, and found the perfect words you should have said. You imagined their expression changing. You heard the disappointment in their voice. You prepared your answers, corrected your mistakes, and replayed the moment until every sentence sounded exactly right. There is only one problem. The conversation never happened. Maybe you were lying in bed, staring at the ceiling. Maybe you were walking home, taking a shower, or sitting silently in a room while someone else's voice lived inside your mind. And even though the conversation was imaginary, the emotions were real. Your heart became tense. Your body reacted. You felt embarrassed, angry, rejected, or misunderstood by something that had not actually occurred. So why does the mind do this? Why do you rehearse conversations that may never happen? And why does something imaginary sometimes feel more emotionally intense than the real interaction itself? The answer is not simply that you think too much. In many cases, your mind is trying to protect you, but the protection it creates can slowly become another kind of prison. Imagine that you need to tell someone something difficult. Maybe you want to set a boundary. Maybe you need to admit that something hurt you. Maybe you are waiting for a message from someone whose opinion matters more than you want to admit. Before anything happens, your mind begins to prepare. You imagine how the conversation might start. Then you imagine their response. You change your words. You soften your tone. You remove anything that could sound demanding, emotional, needy, or confrontational. Then you imagine another possible response. And another. Soon, you are no longer preparing for one conversation. You are preparing for 20 different versions of it. In one version, they understand you. In another, they become defensive. In another, they laugh. In another, they leave. And in the worst version, they confirm the fear you were trying not to face. That you are too much. That your feelings are unreasonable. That you misunderstood everything. That you never mattered as much as you thought you did. The imaginary conversation may appear to be about words, but underneath those words, there is usually a deeper fear. Uncertainty can feel emotionally dangerous. When you do not know how someone will respond, your mind may try to reduce that uncertainty by predicting every possible outcome. It creates scenarios. It studies tone. It remembers old conversations. It collects small details and turns them into evidence. A delayed reply becomes a sign of rejection. A short answer becomes proof that something is wrong. A change in facial expression becomes a warning. Your mind is trying to build a map before entering unfamiliar territory. Because if you can predict the reaction, maybe you can avoid being hurt by it. If you imagine the rejection first, maybe it will not surprise you. If you prepare the perfect explanation, maybe they will not misunderstand you. If you rehearse every answer, maybe you will never be caught speechless again. For a moment, this can create a feeling of control. But it is not real control. It is emotional preparation for a threat that may not exist. The conversation is imaginary. The fear behind it is not. Some people are not searching for the perfect words because they want to communicate clearly. They are searching for the perfect words because they believe they are not allowed to be misunderstood. They feel responsible for controlling every possible interpretation. They think that if the other person reacts badly, it must mean they explained themselves incorrectly. So they edit. They rehearse. They remove emotion from their voice. They search for a sentence so careful, so balanced, and so reasonable that no one could possibly reject it. But no sentence can completely control another person's reaction. You can be honest and still be misunderstood. You can be kind and still disappoint someone. You can explain yourself perfectly and still hear an answer you did not want. For someone who fears rejection, this reality can feel unbearable. Because the goal is no longer communication. The goal is emotional safety. You are not only preparing what to say, you are trying to control how the other person will see you. And the more important that person becomes, the more intense the rehearsals may become. Not every imaginary conversation is about fear. Some are about anger. Inside your mind, you finally say everything you kept hidden. You tell someone how much they hurt you. You explain how unfair they were. You confront them with the truth you were too afraid, too tired, or too confused to express in the moment. In your imagination, they listen. Sometimes they apologize. Sometimes they finally understand. And sometimes you defeat them in an argument they do not even know they are having. These internal conversations can become a place where suppressed emotions are temporarily allowed to exist. Perhaps you learned that anger made you difficult. Perhaps expressing disappointment created conflict. Perhaps your feelings were dismissed so often that silence began to feel safer than honesty. So the emotion did not disappear. It simply found another room. Your mind became the place where every unsent message, unfinished argument, and unspoken boundary continue to live. There, you can say everything without being interrupted. You can be honest without facing consequences. You can express pain without watching someone turn away. But because the conversation never leaves your mind, it never receives a real response. Nothing is resolved. The emotion is expressed, but not released. You may have noticed that one imaginary conversation is rarely enough. The mind returns to it. It changes a sentence. It adds a detail. It imagines a different reaction. It begins again. This happens because the mind is searching for certainty in a situation where certainty is impossible. There is no real person present to surprise you. There is no new information. There is no genuine conclusion. You are playing both roles. You are speaking for yourself, but you are also creating the other person's answers. And those answers are often shaped by your own fears. If you fear rejection, the imagined person may reject you. If you carry guilt, the imagined person may accuse you. If you feel unworthy, the imagined person may treat you as though you are unworthy. The conversation begins to feel like evidence. But it is often evidence created by the same fear that is trying to interpret it. This is why the rehearsal never feels complete. The mind believes the next version might finally produce relief. But instead of solving the conversation, it keeps reopening it. Preparing for an important conversation can be useful. Thinking about what you want to say can help you communicate more clearly. But preparation has an ending. Rumination does not. Preparation asks, what do I need to communicate? Rumination asks, how can I prevent every possible negative outcome? Preparation moves toward action. Rumination remains trapped inside prediction. You may begin to lose sleep over conversations that have not happened. You may feel angry at someone because of a response you imagine them giving. You may avoid contacting them because you have already experienced rejection in your head. You may feel emotionally exhausted before the real interaction even begins. Sometimes the imagined event becomes so vivid that your body reacts as though it has already happened. You carry tension from an argument that never took place. You feel shame about words you never said. You grieve an ending that has not arrived. This does not necessarily mean that something is clinically wrong. Many people experience intense internal dialogues during periods of uncertainty, stress, loneliness, conflict, or emotional vulnerability. But when the habit constantly drains your energy or replaces real communication, it may be worth looking beneath the surface. Instead of asking, why can't I stop thinking about this conversation? Try asking a different question. What am I trying to protect myself from? Maybe you are protecting yourself from humiliation. Maybe you are afraid that showing emotion will make you look weak. Maybe you fear that setting a boundary will make someone leave. Maybe you believe that asking for reassurance will make you seem needy. Maybe you are preparing for rejection because rejection feels easier when it is expected. Or maybe you are trying to protect the relationship by never saying what you truly feel. This is one of the deepest contradictions behind imaginary conversations. The mind rehearses because it wants to keep you safe. But the rehearsal can also keep you silent. It can convince you that you need the perfect words before you are allowed to speak. It can make a simple message feel dangerous. It can make honesty feel like a performance that must be practiced until no vulnerability remains. But honesty without vulnerability is often impossible. Real communication is uncertain because people are uncertain. You cannot script another person. You cannot guarantee understanding. You cannot control whether they stay, apologize, become defensive, or respond with silence. And this lack of control may be exactly what your mind has been trying to escape. The most useful part of an imaginary conversation is not always the conversation itself. It is the emotion that keeps creating it. If the same argument returns every night, perhaps there is resentment that has not been acknowledged. If you repeatedly imagine someone abandoning you, perhaps there is a fear of loss that needs attention. If you constantly rehearse explanations, perhaps you are carrying a deep fear of being judged. If you imagine finally telling someone the truth, perhaps there is a boundary you have been avoiding. Instead of analyzing every sentence, ask what the conversation is trying to express. What do you want the other person to understand? What are you afraid they will say? What outcome are you desperately trying to control? What feeling appears every time the scene begins? And is there something you genuinely need to communicate? Sometimes the answer will be yes. A real conversation may be necessary. Sometimes the answer will be no. The mind may be repeating an old emotional pattern in a new situation. Each person experiences this differently, but separating the emotional need from the imaginary script can create a small amount of distance. You begin to see that the scene in your head is not a prediction. It is a signal. The goal is not to eliminate every internal conversation. That would be unrealistic. The mind imagines, prepares, remembers, and predicts. That is part of being human. The goal is to notice when the rehearsal is helping you and when it is holding you captive. When the conversation begins again, pause. Notice where you are. Look at what is actually happening around you. Then ask yourself, am I preparing for a real conversation, or repeatedly experiencing an imaginary one? If there is something you need to say, reduce it to its simplest honest form. Not the perfect sentence. Not the sentence that guarantees approval. Just the truth you are responsible for communicating. And if there is nothing you can do in that moment, remind yourself that you do not have to emotionally survive every possible future before it arrives. You are allowed to wait for real information. You are allowed to let another person speak for themselves. You are allowed to discover the answer instead of inventing it. Maybe the conversations inside your head were never really about finding the perfect words. Maybe they were your mind's attempt to protect you from rejection, embarrassment, conflict, or abandonment. Maybe they gave you a place to say what you could not say anywhere else. But no amount of rehearsal can create complete control over another person's response. You can replay the scene 100 times and still be surprised by reality. And perhaps that is not always a threat. Perhaps it is also a possibility. The person may understand more than you expected. The conversation may be less painful than the one you imagined. Or you may discover that even when someone misunderstands you, you are still capable of standing behind what you feel. Peace does not always come from predicting the right ending. Sometimes it begins when you stop arguing with a person who is not in the room. When you stop treating fear as evidence. And when you finally listen to what the conversation beneath the conversation has been trying to tell you. Because your mind may be rehearsing the words, but your emotions are asking to be heard. If this video helped you recognize a pattern you could never explain, subscribe to the channel. And in the next video, we will explore why some people pull away at the exact moment they begin to feel emotionally close.